Yeah, cameras are rolling. I'm Professor Mary Jo Eyster, and I'm going to be describing the process from the courses of judicial clerkship, civil practice internship, and consumer counseling and bankruptcy clinic. Now, just if you could give me an idea by show of hands, how many people are primarily interested in hearing about consumer counseling and bankruptcy? Okay. How many are primarily interested in civil practice? And how many judicial? Okay, it's actually fairly evenly split. So I'll just take them in order and try to get through it as quickly as I can. I did bring information which has been gobbled up already, but there's more available. I brought manuals for judicial and civil. And those are still available across the street in the clinic office, and they're also available through the BLS website, and I'll explain that in a little while. I'll explain how to get to that in a little while. So let me first talk briefly, because it's a little more straightforward. I'm going to talk first about the consumer counseling and bankruptcy clinic. How many of you were not at the general information meeting yesterday? Most of you heard Professor Kaplow describe the differences between in-house and externship clinics. Francis, if I move, am I going to get it?
No, you can fine.
All right. But let me just do that briefly for the benefit of the people who weren't there. The in-house clinics are clinics that are taught here in the law school, supervised by faculty members, either full-time or adjunct faculty members, and most of the work is done here right across the street at One Borum Place on the 3rd floor. You have offices there, there's a secretarial staff, and it operates more or less like a legal services office. The Consumer Counseling and Bankruptcy Clinic is one of the programs that's available here in the law school. The objectives of the clinic are to train students and teach students, sensitize you to issues pertaining to dealing with clients, client interviewing and counseling, decision making, problem solving, and it all takes place in the context of dealing with clients who have significant debt problems. We call it consumer counseling and bankruptcy because although many of the clients come in seeking to file for bankruptcy, that's not necessarily the only remedy that they are offered, or it's not necessarily the only remedy that they elect. So we do offer a range of options for them and try to counsel them through the process. The way the in-house clinics generally work, and specifically the consumer counseling clinic works, is that students are working in teams. 2 or 3 students work together on cases. The students have their own caseload. Each team represents somewhere between 10 and 12, 15 clients each semester. And you interview the clients when they first walk in the door. So you're the first person, you're the first people that they come in contact with, and their ongoing contacts are with the student members of their team. I meet with each team weekly on regularly scheduled team meetings so that we can discuss each case and review what the students are working on, what problems they're having, what ideas they have about how to approach the client's problems. We talk about counseling problems, research problems, ethical problems, but I don't actually go to the meetings with the client or attend. They're in the office, but I don't sit in on the meetings with the client, except in unusual circumstances. So that the students really remain at the front and center of all the casework in the in-house clinic. It is a 1-semester clinic. That doesn't mean it's only offered 1 semester. It means you're enrolled only 1 semester. So you can take it in either the fall or the spring semester. And it has a total of 5 credits, 3 clinical credits and then 2 seminar credits. The seminar meets on Tuesdays from 4 to 6. And the focus of the seminar is the same as the focus of the fieldwork, which is issues pertaining to client interviewing, counseling, ethics, problem solving, sometimes negotiation, not particularly pertaining to the substantive law of bankruptcy. Now, as I said yesterday, there will be a sort of shift in our gears next fall, because there is legislation being passed, or at least debated and probably passed right now, that is called reform legislation. The reform will mean that it will be virtually impossible for poor people to get bankruptcy relief unless they're so poor that they don't need it. And what I mean by that is people who are essentially what we call judgment-proof, who can't really be, they can be sued by creditors, and the creditors can get a judgment and back up the judgment, but they can't necessarily enforce it because the individual is so poor that he or she has no assets or income that can be taken to satisfy the judgment. Now, people like that do sometimes want to come in and want to talk to us, and sometimes want to file for bankruptcy for a variety of reasons. And those people will probably continue to be able to file for bankruptcy under this new so-called reform legislation. People who are working for a company will not be able to, will have to file under, instead of filing under Chapter 7 where they get full debt discharge, they'll have to file under Chapter 13 where they essentially have to work on a payment plan and pay off a portion of their debt. It's not entirely clear how the legislation is going to work. It's not 100% clear that it's going to pass, although it's supposedly going to spend in the last 4 years, and it looks pretty certain. And it's certainly going to be signed by this president. The last president vetoed the legislation or threatened to veto the legislation each time it came up. So we will be working undoubtedly with the new law next fall, although it may take effect late in the semester, so the impact may not be felt. So we're going to kind of be working through that, and I'll just be keeping my eye on that process during the summer to try to calculate when it's going to happen and what it's going to mean. But I would strongly suggest, it's not an absolute requirement, but I would strongly suggest that you are interested in taking this clinic, that you also enroll in debtor-creditor in the spring semester. It's not usually, in the fall semester. It's not usually offered that it's debtor-creditor. It's not usually offered in the spring semester. There are usually 2 sections offered in the fall. You can take debtor-creditor either contemporaneously or before you take the clinic. There will be enough issues for us to deal with the new legislation that it really would be beneficial, I think, for the students who have already at least gotten the groundwork, because the way the bankruptcy laws work generally is not exactly similar to any other civil legislative scheme. So I think it's helpful for you to already have ground in debtor-creditor law. I would probably be conducting interviews. So when you apply for the clinic, if you list the bankruptcies as your first choice, I will be calling, or my secretary will be calling you to schedule an interview sometime toward the end of the semester before exam. Most of the in-house clinics do conduct in-person interviews with the students who apply, so it's fairly routine. In terms of preference, if I have more students than I can accommodate, I would probably give preference to students who have or are taking debtor-creditor. And if anyone is a third-year student, I would probably give preference to third-year students merely because it's their last opportunity to enroll in clinical programs. Now, that's not, however, a statement in any way that to suggest that third-year students are better able or better equipped to handle the work of the clinic. I personally have never noticed any difference. I shouldn't say this. I haven't noticed any particular difference in the confidence of second-year students and third-year students in conducting clinical work, which is not to say you don't learn anything in the class during the second year that gives you an advantage in the third year, but truthfully, it just hasn't seemed to, there hasn't seemed to be a significant difference. So second-year students are certainly able and welcome to apply, and often make up the dominant portion of the clinic, but I will give preference to third-year students who haven't taken clinics before. The clinic, the in-house clinic, the bankruptcy clinic, is graded, same as other courses. It's regular ABC model of grading, and the seminar is graded separately from the field book. So it's a total of 5 credits, but you get 2 separate grades, one for 2 credits and one for 3. Once you accept a position in an in-house clinic, you are not permitted to drop it, because as I've described, there is an application interview, and usually it means that a certain number of students are not allowed to enroll because of the limitations on enrollment, on cap on enrollment. So once I've selected the probably 6 students for the in-house clinic, and other students who apply will be referred to as second or third choice, at that point you are required to honor that commitment and remain in the clinic. So if you have any concerns or hesitation, you need to make sure that you let me know that before other students are turned away. Okay. I don't want to take questions now. I want to get to the other 2 clinics in case people have any time constraints. If you have any other questions, you can either stay to the end, and I'll be here till about 2:30. You can either stay to the end and ask questions, or you can email, or pick up information from the staff at the okay, I want to turn now to the civil practice internship. I guess before I do that, are there any general things about this, not specific to your situation, but any general points about the that I can cover?
We're going to be working in corporate bankruptcy and individual.
It's primarily individual bankruptcy. Corporations typically don't go to law school clinics first. Yeah, we've had a couple of occasions where some much less successful corporate interests have, or small business, not really corporate. And in general, they're so unsuccessful that usually it turns out that we really can't do much for them. But we have, I think we did represent a couple of small business establishments like mom and pop kind of corner deli type stores, that kind of thing. But usually they don't even think about coming in. So, but hopefully, and particularly starting next year, we will be doing both Chapter 7 and Chapter 13, because Chapter 13 wants to do legislation. And it doesn't, by the way, it doesn't matter for the majority of you who don't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. You'll know. All you got to do is read the New York Times and you'll be able to follow this. But we will be handling both next semester. In the past, we haven't done as many Chapter 13 because typically the kinds of clients who have come in haven't really needed or wanted to file under Chapter 13. Yeah. Just general questions, Jim.
The hours per week?
12 hours a week. Again, and this is true for all the clinics, usually for 3 credits of field work, it's a requirement of 12. For 3 credits, it's 12 hours. The ratio is 4 hours per credit. Okay. Other general questions? Okay, now let me turn to the civil practice internship, which is undoubtedly in some ways the most complicated. And if you haven't received, if you haven't picked up a copy of this manual, the application and placement procedures you can get either online or in the manual, there are more copies over the clinic office starting on page 2. The application procedures is described. I want to just flip this so I can explain how to get this information. I'm assuming some familiarity. Most of you have some familiarity with the web course in the box. But just in case you're not exactly sure how it works. To get into the web course in the box information that I'm referring to here, you go to the BLS homepage. Everybody knows how to do that. Booklaw.edu. Right? There's a bar somewhere down the page that says web courses in a box, or courses with web courses in a box.
Web course in the box, on the upper right corner.
Sorry?
The upper right, in the maroon bar up top, it says web course.
Okay, so you click on that, and it's going to bring up a list of all the courses in the law school that are currently using web course in a box. You scroll down, you'll find my name, and you'll find civil clinic or civil practice. I think it's a civil clinic, or judicial clinic, whichever one you're interested. You click on that. You'll see, when you click on that, you'll see civil practice internship, and there'll be 6 icons. Course information is one of them, announcements is one of them, learning links is one of them. Under each of these icons, you'll find different kinds of information. And there's it's not necessarily logical to the name of the icon, like course information or learning links. It has to do with where it was easy for me to provide a web link. So I think that these manuals are provided in course information and in learning links. the announcements icon didn't have any web links, and this is an HTML format, which just means you have to, check gray background and stuff, letters. It sometimes has screwy format to it. Anyway, the whole document can be obtained there. You can also obtain, if you did that red, is that the red book? Did you pull that up? Then it's great copy. If anyone didn't get that, those are also available in the web course link under the clinical programs link. And that's the general clinic information. So any of these can be obtained through the web course in the box if you misplace your information or don't obtain it. Okay, in the civil practice internship, first of all, it's really important when you're filling out the application to fill in underneath, on the second page, flip the application over, there's a list of categories of placement. And beneath that, immediately beneath that, it says, what are your goals for this internship, and what are your goals for this clinic? And I would really like you to fill that out and be as specific as you can be. If the only thing you can really tell me about your goal is you want some real-world hands-on experience, that's okay. But that doesn't help me a whole lot, because in any one of the offices that I would send you to, you would get real-world hands-on experience. That's sort of the nature of an internship. If you can be more specific, be more specific. If you really can't, don't make something up. But what that means to me when you say real-world hands-on experience is that you're not terribly limited, and so a placement in kind of a lot of different areas would be okay with you. And if that's true, that's fine. That makes it easier for me to find an appropriate placement. If you have a very, very specific objective, make sure you articulate that, and I will do my best to accommodate you. What I cannot do is I cannot necessarily guarantee that if you write the SEC as your first and only choice, that I will be able to send you there, and I certainly can't guarantee that you will get a placement there. I'm happy to see which offices you are interested in, but that does not mean that I am necessarily going to refer your application to that office. If every person in this room gave me an application for fall listing in the New York Stock Exchange as his or her first choice, I certainly wouldn't send all those applications to the New York Stock Exchange. I'm not the director of the placement office. I'm the director of the clinical program, and my objective is to find a good learning environment for each of the students who is interested in enrolling in the clinic. My objective is not finding you a, quote, job in a particular office. So the reason I wouldn't send 50 people to the New York Stock Exchange is because I know they would only accept probably 2 or 3. And the other, 48 or so might be out of luck. So that's not consistent with my agenda, which is to find appropriate learning situations for everyone. That's why I might go to your second choice, your third choice, your fourth choice, your fifth choice before I can really, or something you didn't list. For example, I may know that the New York City Transit Authority is a terrific place to get both corporate and litigation experience. You may not know that. You may think it's a place where you just put the fall cases on, pretending to put the fall on the subways here. And that, in fact, isn't what they cover at all, because they have a separate tort office that does that. So I may know that that might be a good placement for someone who has a general interest in learning about corporate and litigation skills. And I might refer you there even though you didn't put it on your application. So what I need is as much information as you can give me. When I send out the application, I send your application to one office at a time, not to 4 or 5 or all the offices you have listed. Then you receive a letter stating that your application and writing sample have been referred to this office. It will give you contact person's name, the address of the office, and the phone number. Then it's up to you to contact that office, set up an appointment, and go into your interview, and then let us know what happened. If you got an interview and you decided that you really weren't interested, what they do isn't what you thought they did, and you don't want to go there, that's fine, as long as you make sure that you're clear with the person who interviewed you that you haven't decided yet whether to accept placement or that you've decided not to. Don't let them think that you're accepting the placement if you have reservations or decided against it. If you haven't heard anything from the office, either before you interview or after you interview, you haven't heard back from them, after several weeks, we'll put a date in the referral letter that you get. It'll say, if you don't know anything by X date, please call us and let us know. If you interview and they tell you they'll get back to you in about 2 weeks and it's been 3 weeks, call and find out what happened. Or call us and let us know. Because it may just be an oversight or they may not have decided yet, but I'm warning them because if they're sitting on it and not making a decision, it might be in your best interest for us to refer you to a second or a third or fourth option. Okay. Hold on a second, let me just check my notes. Ultimately, once you do secure a placement somewhere, you need to let us know and submit an enrollment sheet. And those enrollment sheets are, enrollment forms are among the forms in the back of this manual. In the appendix, there's an enrollment form for the civil and judicial enrollment form. And again, you can obtain this online because all the documents are online. Now, if you're looking for a placement on your own, if you want to secure a placement on your own, you may do that, but you have to go through the procedures for approval of the placement. And specifically, you need to submit a request for approval. The forms are in the manual. You can also obtain them at the clinic office. And I'll let everybody follow up for it. The request for approval asks for certain information. It asks you to describe the nature of the work and the placement. It asks for the name of your supervising attorney. The reason it asks for a supervising attorney is because I need to check with that person. I need to speak with that person to discuss the nature of the internship and their understanding about their role. Now, it must be an attorney. If your supervisor is not an attorney, it's not going to be approved. You have to be working with, you have to be supervised by a licensed attorney who's practicing law, and it has to be in a legal setting, not doing some other kind of work. Sometimes there are lines that are not real clear, and those may or may not be approved. For example, in sort of public policy areas, what's policy and what's law, sometimes even in a legislative setting, can be obviously a little unclear. So those are situations that I just have to evaluate as they come up. In finance, sometimes even in sports or entertainment area, where there's sort of agency lawyer relationships. Those are things that I have to evaluate. Generally speaking, the only placements that will be approved for credit are with not-for-profit and government offices. There are some exceptions, particularly in the entertainment sector, where it's hard to find not-for-profit and virtually impossible to find government settings where you can get opportunities. However, that doesn't mean that every placement in the entertainment sector is going to be approved. I try to be particularly careful about those because those are situations where there is a tendency for the field supervisor of the office to take, I would say, inappropriate advantage of the situation by giving students inappropriate work and making inappropriate demands. I don't mean anything off-color. I mean Xeroxing, filing, getting coffee, answering phones. And I have had some experience with some of the offices that I will reject outright because I've had track records with them that haven't been too good. Some of the offices we've had a fine relationship with, and they've done a good job of giving the students substantive work and providing really good mentoring, but those I have to be very careful with.
In that field, though, you're the one that places us with them, though, right?
I'm talking now about independent placements that you're coming for approval. If I send you, yeah, I expect it to be a good situation, but even there I can't guarantee it because no matter what the nature of the office is, and even with the supervisor, There are times when a supervisor is just overworked or stressed out in a particular time period and doesn't do as good a job as he or she used to. Yesterday, the question was raised, and that sort of connects with this point. The question was raised by somebody at the general session about the difference and the sort of pros and cons of an in-house clinic versus an externship clinic. And Professor Kaplan gave partial answer, I think, in terms of the different kinds of work. But I think there are lots of factors that go into this, and to some extent, it's really something you have to evaluate based on your own understanding of your learning style and work style preferences. In the externship clinic, generally speaking, there is a different kind of supervision, and it's usually somewhat looser, in the sense that you will be working kind of at your pace. You'll be given some direction, but there may or may not be a very clear structure to the way that you receive feedback and the way you get assignments and the way that you do your work. And the nature of that, the structure or lack of structure, is going to be dependent to a large extent on the field supervisor, whose training is not teaching but practicing law. Some students seem very much to prefer that to the more structured in-house model. Now, the sort of tension here is that in in-house clinics, as I described earlier, you actually get, in some ways, more responsibility over the cases. But with that, there's more structured and careful supervision, perhaps because you're carrying more responsibility, ultimately because you do handle virtually all of the work pertaining to the case. In the externship model, you may be given an assignment, and some students will perhaps say that they work on it for 2 weeks without talking to their supervisor, at least without talking to their supervisor about the assignment. They may talk about it. So that really probably would never happen in an in-house clinic. So that's one of the differences. And so what comes with that is there's an increased responsibility on the part of the student in an externship clinic to be vigilant about making sure that you're getting what you need. That pertains to in-house clinics as well, but less so. In other words, if you feel you're not getting adequate supervision, if you feel that you're not getting assignments in a way that you understand them or that they're not appropriate assignments, if you feel that you need more clear and helpful criticism, critique, feedback, then to some extent the burden is on you to seek that from your supervisor. You may get a terrific supervisor who's really got great structure and gives you all this stuff without asking, but often that's not the case. It's hard for the supervisor to know what your needs are unless you are supervising. So in the externship setting, it's more important for you to sort of constantly be aware, is this the experience that I need and that I want, and is this getting me the kind of learning experience that I felt that I was going to be getting. So if you do get a supervisor who's not terrific, even if I'm the one who referred you, no guarantee. I refer you to the office. It's not always the case that I know exactly who you're going to be working with. Then you need to take some kind of corrective action, and there's a whole variety of things that I'm not going to go into that can be done, but there's no guarantee that the supervisor in an externship setting is going to be, the perfect mentor. And what constitutes a perfect mentor will be different for each person, depending on your own preference. All right, I've covered this kind of place, and I want to get on to judicial, so there's time for questions. So let me go on to judicial, and then you can ask questions, because these two questions are likely to be pretty similar. The judicial internship process placement process is somewhat similar, very similar actually, to the civil, which is to say, when you get your application, again, there are no guarantees that if you say you want to go to federal district court judge, and specifically this one, there's no guarantee that I'm going to be able to refer you there. As I mentioned yesterday, the judges are somewhat particular about grade points, GPA. So when I'm making referrals to federal judges, magistrate judges, bankruptcy judges, and district court judges, I do need to review your grades, and I'm specifically interested in your GPA as well as your writing grades, because that's what they're interested in. And What that means usually is that you have to have at least a 3 point or higher in order to go to any of the federal courts. And sometimes it's significantly higher, but that's hard to predict. It really depends on how many students apply and how competitive it is that particular semester. We've had certainly semesters where it's been 3.5 and higher for the district court, and up to 3.2 for magistrate, 3.2 and up for faculty judges. That's a little less clear, but in general, if your GPA is not above 3 points, then it's probably not going to be referred to district court or magistrate or faculty judge in the federal system. Now, that doesn't mean that's it. There are plenty of judges, and some of the state court judges, in fact, are much better mentors, and some of those environments are much better learning environments because, in general, the state court judges tend to spend more time individually with the students and give them more attention. In federal court, in general, most of the supervision is provided by the law clerk. And most of the law clerks, as you may or may not know, are either 1 or 2 years out of law school. And they may be terrific writers, but it's not as though they have the benefit of, 10 or 15 years of practice on or being on the bench. So when you think about it, if what you're really interested in is a good, solid learning experience, being with a Supreme Court justice who's possibly been on the bench for 10 years and having some really, direct mentoring relationship with the Supreme Court justice may be a much better situation than getting the supervision and direction from a first or second year lawyer who graduated undoubtedly at the top of his or her class, but nonetheless hasn't had that kind of long experience. Typically, the focus of the judicial clerkship will be on research and writing. That's usually a huge piece of it. Legal analysis, of course, research and writing. And also on developing kind of an understanding of the judicial decision-making process. Now, other things that often and usually the students want to see happen and do happen in the internship are pertaining to observing how lawyers interact with judges and how lawyers and clients interact with each other. If you are with a judge who allows you to spend a fair amount of time or some time in court observing motions, trials, whatever is coming along, usually students find it very instructive to see lawyering styles and how lawyers impress judges and juries or fail to impress them negatively and positively, I guess. So that can also be a really important part of the learning experience. But the predominant emphasis, of course, is on doing legal research and helping the judge decide issues that come up in the case. As far as the referral to judges, again, generally it's one judge at a time. There are some exceptions that I don't even want to try to explain because they're a little tricky, but in general, we send you to one judge at a time. One important feature of interviewing with the judge is if you go to an interview with a judge that I've referred you to, not one that you found on your own, but I've referred you to, if you go to the interview, then you are required to accept a position in his office. The judges have essentially demanded that we give them sort of a guarantee that if they take the time to interview the student will accept the place. But they don't want to spend time interviewing people who aren't ultimately really interested in the place. So if for any reason you have any qualms about whether or not you want to do the internship or whether you're serious about it, then don't schedule the interview. Now, the way the interview process works in this respect is a little different from the civil internship. The court will contact you if you interview rather than you contacting them. In the civil practice internship, you get the name of the contact person and the phone number. In judicial, you're merely informed where your application was sent, but they will contact you when they're ready to interview. Again, this is just an accommodation to the judge's wishes. So you need to let the office know, and your letter that you get, your referral letter, will tell you if you haven't heard anything by X date. It's usually 3 weeks or 4 weeks later. Let us know. Sometimes we'll send applications to a judge who just doesn't get around to doing anything for a while. Sometimes the judge isn't interested and doesn't, usually they tell us, but sometimes they don't. So if they tell us, we'll send it out again to somebody else right away. But if the judge doesn't tell us, and you don't tell us, then we think things are proceeding and they're not. So we need to know. As far as obtaining a placement on your own and getting approval, typically there's really not a problem. We prefer that it be not a relative or close family friend. That's really the only. In other words, don't, you know, if your sister, your uncle, or somebody is a judge, it's not a good idea to do an internship. You may want to do something with enough credit, but it's a little harder for us to be specific about our demands or enforce our expectations and demands when we're dealing with a family friend or relative. But apart from that, the process is similar to the civil process. You give me a request for approval, I'll review it. Most of the time, there's no question, I just approve it because it's a judge, usually it's a judge who has had interns from law school before, and they know our procedures. I may at times have to call the judge just to introduce myself in the program, but in general, there's no issue about the judicial clerkship being approved. Same hour requirement, 12 hours a week for 3 credits. And the seminar requirement is the same. It's a 2-hour-a-week seminar for 1 credit. And the seminar has been meeting, you know, it was meeting on Monday. I'm not sure when the seminar is going to be meeting. We're in the process of nailing that down. So you'll know before you have to register for your course, but I'm not sure when it's going to be. It may be Monday 4 to 6. It may be Wednesday 4 to 6. But we'll know more by the beginning of the summer. Both the extern clinics, civil and judicial, are graded on a modified pass-fail basis. That's high pass, pass, low pass, and fail. So you don't get a numeric grade equivalent, so it doesn't enter into your GPA. It does appear on your transcript, but it does not affect your GPA in either way. Okay, I think I've covered everything, and I'm ready first to take general questions, and then if we get to specific questions. Yeah.
Oh, this might be a little specific, but I was wondering in the civil if there's placement on the plaintiff side in personal injury work?
No, there isn't, because that's not either governmental or not-for-profit, and it's definitely for-profit. So in general, you don't do that. Yes.
We have a judicial question. Would you like to apply in the summer?
There are maybe placements still available in the summer. It's certainly getting tight. A lot of the judges I've contacted recently have said that they're full. But I'm sure, you know, there are a lot of judges. On the federal level, it's probably just about impossible, but on the state level, there are undoubtedly still some judges who are willing to take interest. And sometimes at the very last minute, they call me. And maybe somebody they thought was lined up for the summer changed their mind or something. So sometimes even right before the semester starts, there are judges who still work. So it's called her.
Assuming we apply, say, for the bankruptcy clinic within the next week or so, when would we have to accept an offer from you for?
After I do the interviews and notify the students who are accepted, it's about a week. I give you about a week to let me know, because I want to be able to offer to the next tier of students in the event that somebody doesn't accept. And after that, I'm going to have to refer those students to another clinic so they don't get left out.
What month were you thinking that would be?
May. Yeah. Well, the interviews will probably take place in May. Applications, I think, are due April 18th, and just judging by how busy it's been. I'm not sure, but it'll be around, you know, sometime between the beginning and middle of May, I think. Oh, I spoke of this yesterday, and I want to say this again, just in terms of application strategy and how confusing the whole process can be. What I suggested yesterday is, if you're really kind of not sure what you want to do, what's first choice, what's second choice, bearing in mind, if you put down your first choice is civil practice internship, I'm going to have that application. I'm probably not going to even make the referrals until sometime. I'm definitely not going to make the referrals until sometime in May. Now, if your second choice is bankruptcy or safe harbor or elder law clinic, chances are those programs will have filled up before I deal with your civil practice application. So if you don't get the placement you want in the civil practice internship, it's going to be too late to go to one of the in-house. Usually, it's going to be too late to go to one of the in-house clinics because usually those fill up at the beginning. So, in general, if you're sort of thinking, well, either one of these has worked okay for me, make sure you apply to your in-house clinic choice first. Now, if your first choice really is clearly some externship office and that's really what you're interested in, then you can put that first, because you will have to make a commitment to the in-house clinic, so you won't be able to just say, okay, that's nice, I've got an offer from you, now let me see what else comes along. I realize that the time issue, to some extent, makes it a little difficult, but see, the flip side of that would be all of us would be interviewing like 200 students, that's quite exaggeration, but all of us would be interviewing, you know, tons of students who are interviewing with 4 clinics at a time and then making the choices, and frankly, we don't have the time to do that. We've also got to teach. So there's no way we can do it that doesn't create a certain amount of sort of a little bit of problem or tension for you, but this strategy of finding the in-house clinics first, I think, is the safer one in terms of choices that are kind of, you know, level where you'd be happy with either spot. Yes.
I'm a little confused with the externships.
Just a little?
Yeah, just a little. Like, are our chances increased of getting into one of these places by applying through you? That, I mean, is like a better chance than if we had just applied to one of them normally?
To tell you the truth, I can't really answer that because I don't know what processes they use on their end. If you want to apply on your own to any offices that you want to then obtain credit for, the advantage of doing it on your own is you can send out 50 resumes. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to send, I'm not going to send you to 50 offices. Now, whether or not these offices give a higher priority to students who are referred by me, I couldn't tell you. I really don't know. I know that there are offices that almost always accept our students. They don't always accept everybody I send them, but they always accept a substantial number of students I send them. Whether or not that would happen if you applied individually, independently, I really don't know. So, I guess it doesn't hurt. If you are applying to offices on your own, as well as to the clinic, please let me know on your application so that I don't end up sending, I don't want to send you to an office that you've already applied to. So if you are applying to, a few offices, let me know which, or judges, let me know which one. And by the way, if I send you to, Federal Judge A and you apply to B, C, and D on your own, this rule about going to the interview still pertains. That is, if you interview with the judge to whom I refer you, you are required to accept that placement at this office. So if I sent you to A and you interview with A and you also interview with B, C, and D, and A offers you a position, you are required to accept it. So you really have to hold off on B, C, and D until you know whether or not A is offering you a position. Because that is the expectation that the judges have, well, demand, it's not an expectation, it's what kind of a requirement. Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Francis, and thank you.